So BDS not going. G2, I will say, Thorin, when it comes to G2, I'm not sure. G2 hasn't looked good. Like, Mickey X has looked actively bad in some of these games. We haven't seen Broken Blade or Yike having hero performances. Like, a lot of
people have been worse. Bro,
Yeah.
Here's the obvious reason why. It's just obvious. Because you do know it still hasn't yet cost them Monty. They still did win summer. They still might come back and win these finals. They must not
still go into Worlds.
The real problem is you can even see the way they play. They don't really ever look like complete shit, like they're not in the game. It always just looks like, right, you know what, crack, right, better get to work then. And then they just win anyway. They can still do it now. They still do it now, bro. So the problem is, until they actually, for real, just fuck up and lose a split or come second or third, I actually think that's one of the worst things about their team, is that they sort of know they can fuck around. They know that this isn't the end. This should be like panic stations, but it's not really. Like, if they course correct and they win the next two series and they go with the number one seed from World, won't everyone just sort of go like, they've got time, the boot camp to fix it? Like, I think that's actually like I was saying this on Best Damn League Show as well. The downside of having a super team where you can flex all over the map and you can play all lanes is you're going to think, well, there's no problem too big to solve. Like, we can always get it together.
I think the issue,
I don't think they realize how bad it is yet. I don't think they know how bad these games look, bro.
Yeah, and this isn't one of those times where they're going to have weeks to boot camp at Worlds, Thorin. You know what I mean? Like, this is do or die for G2. There is no time to boot camp for anybody this year. World starts on September 25th. That's under a month from now. Nobody is going to boot camp in Korea this year. Everybody's just going to have to go straight to Europe, or G2 is just going to have to stay there. You can't go to Korea, get all jet lagged for 10 days, and then come back and jet lag yourself on the return. Like, you can't do that. There's not going to be practice opportunities. So it's really serious that teams actually get it together now, because there is going to be hardly any time for these teams to practice prior to Worlds. It is the end of these
should just meet in the middle.
So
all just go to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, meet in the middle, have a mini bootleg with mini jet lag, and then just go to the location. All I'm saying is the Saudis have prepared a better world for us, Monty. It's just up to us to be humble enough to step through that door into that brave new world.
How very generous of them. So when we actually look at the schedule, like, we're going to have the games in Munich this weekend in the stadium, but then you're going to have to take a couple of days, and there just isn't time before play-in starts to really have a meaningful boot camp. So I'd be shocked. I'd be shocked if G2 actually went. And as for other teams, if you guys are thinking, oh, well, what about those North American teams? They're going to start even later, guys. We're 2 weeks out from the LCS finals. They have one less week in order to make any kind of boot camp work. So it's fortunate, at least in their case, that Team Liquid actually looks really good right now, because they're probably not going to need that Korean boot camp in order to get into Worlds shape, right? So I think for G2, unless they can suddenly snap back, this is going to be a problem. And like, it is a huge problem. Did you guys realize that Hans Sama has played one Zeri game this entire year, and that was in the series against Giant X. He's clearly not confident on this champion. I guess they showed it against a worse team, so maybe teams will respect it. And Caps is playing it in the mid lane. But this is a team that has really struggled with playing the meta. Caps is a great Tristana player, but he hasn't been as good on Zeri, right? He hasn't been as good on Corki. Broken Blade has liked a lot of kind of weird picks in the top side, even though he's been fine. But I think on tanks, but G2 has looked their best when Yike is on a more utility-based jungler, when Broken Blade is on a standard top laner, and when Caps and Hansama are on 280 carries. But they have to actually make that work, and they have not been comfortable in this meta. They have not been. And you can tell that because they don't have the flexibility that other top teams have at this current point in time. And that's a big deal. That's a big deal, especially if the meta isn't going to change all that much heading into Worlds. Like, we don't even know. I think it's 14-19, so we got 2 more patches in order to see Worlds form. But it's like, for Hanasama, I'm concerned about the champion pool. He has played 0 games on Ziggs this year. Ziggs is an enormous pick in LCK and LPL. It is very powerful right now, especially in the bot lane. Obviously, a mid lane pick for Team Liquid, but they're a little bit stranger in that regard because of APA. But it's still a champion that they can use. And we're just not seeing that. Like, Hansama is still stuck on like Varys Callista. I mean, those champions are not as powerful as they used to be. So I don't know, man. Like, it just seems like they don't have all of the tools that other teams have. And Mad Lions, for all their faults.
Oh, mate, if G2 was in LPL, they would really struggle now, mate. Like, you know how many games I've seen in the LPL where someone just dives bot lane, gets like 1 kill ahead, and then you can just basically win the game off that if you have like super powerful bot lane. Like, G2 would get murked in the LPL, mate.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's true.
And over there, Zeri mid's unbelievable, takes over the game all day long, mate. Like, you just don't see that in their team. G2 doesn't do that.
Yeah, I mean, the Tristana is very good, to be fair, but they also just don't seem to prioritize a lot of the same picks that other teams do. They don't seem to flex them in the way that other teams do. And I think they were kind of lucky to escape the BDS series with a win. Like, some of those games that they won were not the last one, obviously. That was just a complete stomp. But, you know, it got hairy there for a little bit in games 3 and 4 for them. And they had to kind of scale up into the late game. And like I said, I'm glad we're seeing more kind of meta standard compositions from G2, which does give me, I still think I would pick them over Fnatic if push came to shove, because it's not like Fnatic has had outstanding performances. And, you know, if you think about the Mad Lions series, Noah did actually generally have a very good series versus Mad Lions.
Games, yeah.
But is that what you want to hitch your wagon to, whether Noah has a good series or not? That's just not reliable. That's not a reliable way to get wins for Fnatic. So I need something more than that in order to really predict them versus G2.
Well, you also think as well, another problem they've had in their team was, because for the first year or so, you never really knew, actually, who is Yike supposed to be as a jungler? Because he came into their team, they made it all super cozy early on, like Danny, Jojo style, integrate him into the team, gradually let him start playing a little bit more. He could play the Belveth or something crazy like that every now and then. But like, if you look at him this year, I also feel like he's sometimes a bit mismatched with their team. Like, I think sometimes if you look at the comps they run, Monty, sometimes they do just want him to be like old Yankos and just play like a Sejuani or Maokai or just play something chill, you know. But I get the feeling Yike wants to be like some sort of star jungler and he wants like the fucking carries and shit. Like, I don't know, that feels like a bit of a mismatch to me, because one thing I actually appreciate with most top teams is, in my opinion, the main thing is, you see this with BLG right now, mate. I don't actually think Way's better than fucking Jun, mate, but he might be better for the way BLG wants to play. That's the problem with jungles and supports, isn't it? Like, you don't always want the better player. Like, maybe you don't want self-made, maybe you don't want a guy with hands, maybe you want a guy who just plays like Santorin and just plays for the fucking lanes or something. So I also wonder how them mixing that in, because before the game was somewhat set for Yike, whereas actually I feel like now, especially when you're playing teams like with Razork and Elyoya, these junglers have massive impact over the game, mate. So what do you think of that aspect? Like, how do you think about Yike's play within their team?
I mean, I think he's over-engaged at times, you know, in the summer playoffs or in the season playoffs right now, and that he's gotten caught a lot. He's gotten ahead of the team at times on Vi. His Vi looks kind of worse than it has in the past. I think they're best when he's on Maokai Sejuani. That's what I think. I think you look at those champions for him and you look at the way that it interacts with the rest of the team, and I think it's boring, it's standard, but it also has, I think, the least amount of variance for this team. And there's too much variance within G2 right now. And so I think going back to basics and going back to kind of cookie cutter meta is very good for them. And I think it will and has helped Yike. Like, I don't want to see any weird Yike picks. Unfortunately, that's part of the power of G2 at international competition, right? Is having these picks, but they are just worse when it happens right now. I mean, I think the biggest offender has probably been Mickey X on some of these engages, but on the whole, as a team, whether it's Yike or Mickey X going in first, there hasn't been the follow up there a lot of the time. Like, they have looked very uncoordinated when it comes to the way that they're playing the map. And I don't know it's very weird, because that hasn't been a problem for them in the past, but it seems like one player is always going in while the others are going out these days, and that causes them to lose a lot of these team fights. And then you stack on top of that picks like blind Aatrox and shit. Like, why are we doing this? Why are we doing blind Aatrox? Like, we don't need it ain't the patch for blind Aatrox. You know what I mean? Just play standard. Just try and play more standard.
For real, I might just do what BDS has been doing, mate. When BDS became shit, they just had the most obvious cynical draft response.
Yep.
They would like just draft team fighting champions and just team fight around objectives. And it worked against everyone except G2. That worked. So like, dude, you could do that too. You could probably just win LEC doing that. It's easy. Come on, you've got the team for it.
Yeah, it's just a matter of them actually being able to play the priority picks, because giving those away has been problematic for them.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.